It started with a color, a violent, belligerent yellow, the kind of yellow you see on hornets and toxic waste warnings. It wasn't there when I'd taken my morning coffee out to the porch, but now, affixed to the side of my little free library, it was the only thing I could see. The library was my anchor, my tribute, hand-built from cedar planks that still smelled of forest and sawdust, with a little plexiglass door and a shingled roof that matched our house. Arthur and I had drawn up the plans on a napkin one evening, months before he was gone. He'd wanted a copper finial for the top. Every library, big or small, deserves a little bit of grandeur, he'd said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. I'd found the perfect one, a small, stylized owl, and installed it myself. It was the last piece. Now that obscene yellow sticker was slapped right below the owl's perch. I set my lukewarm coffee on the porch railing and walked across the damp grass. The sticker was thick, laminated, and stuck on with an industrial-grade adhesive that would probably take the paint with it. In severe, black, all-caps lettering, it declared, "Violation. Oak Creek HOA Covenant 7.4. Unapproved permanent structure." Unapproved structure? I looked at the little box on its post. It was filled with some of Arthur's favorite paperbacks, a few children's books I'd picked up, and a well-loved copy of Walden. It wasn't a structure. It was a memory. It was an invitation. My breath hitched. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. In the 3 weeks since I'd planted it by the sidewalk, it had become a small point of light in the neighborhood. I'd seen kids on their bikes stop and excitedly swap books. I'd watched Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down borrow a romance novel, a guilty little smile on her face. This had to be Brenda Reynolds. I saw her then, retrieving her mail from the community post box at the end of the cul-de-sac. She moved with a rigid posture, as if her spine were made of rebar. Brenda was our Homeowners Association president, a title she wore with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. She was a woman who measured lawn height with a ruler and considered off-white patio furniture a slippery slope to anarchy. Steeling myself, I walked toward her. "Brenda," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Good morning." She turned, a polite but completely vacant smile fixed on her face. "Clara May, everything all right?" "I found this on my library," I said, gesturing back toward my lawn. "It says it's an unapproved structure. Surely that's not right?" Brenda adjusted the bundle of letters in her hand. "Oh, the notice. Yes, that's right. All permanent structures require prior submission and approval from the Architectural Review Committee. It's all in the covenant, Section 7. She said covenant the way a preacher says gospel. I blinked. "Brenda, it's a box of books on a post. It's for the community. The children love it." "Be that as it may," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Rules are rules. They exist to protect property values for all of us. If we allow one unapproved structure, we have to allow them all. Today, a library. Tomorrow, a tool shed painted purple. Where does it end?" Her logic was a frustrating, perfect circle of nonsense. "But no one would ever approve a purple tool shed. This is something good. It's in memory of Arthur." My voice cracked on his name. I hated it. I hated that I had to use my grief as a defense. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, was it sympathy, crossed her face? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar mask of bureaucratic steel. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Clara May, truly. But the covenant doesn't make exceptions for bereavement. You can submit a retroactive application, of course, but I can tell you now the committee doesn't approve structures of that nature in front-facing yards." "So, what am I supposed to do?" "You have 7 days to remove it. After that, a fine of $100 will be levied. The fine will double for each subsequent week of non-compliance." She delivered the sentence as if reciting the weather forecast. She then gave me that same empty smile and turned, walking back toward her impeccably manicured, rule-abiding home. I stood there by the mailboxes, the morning sun feeling cold on my skin. It wasn't about a box. It wasn't about a rule. It was about power. And I, with my little monument to my husband's love for books, was a threat to Brenda Reynolds's perfectly orderly, beige-colored kingdom. That evening, I got the letter. Official HOA letterhead. The threat was now in print, signed with Brenda's prim, angular signature. $100 for a box of books. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hand, and looked out the window at the little library. In the twilight, someone had left a book in the return slot. A small act of community, a quiet exchange of trust. A hot, unfamiliar anger began to simmer in my chest. This wasn't just their neighborhood, it was my neighborhood too. It was Arthur's neighborhood. And I wasn't about to let his memory be dismantled by a bully with a binder full of bylaws. Before the yellow sticker, the library had a life of its own. Its first customer was 7-year-old Leo Martinez, a whirlwind of energy who lived across the street. He'd screech to a halt on his scooter, his eyes wide. "Is that for free?" he'd asked, pointing a chubby finger. "You take a book, you leave a book," I'd explained from my porch. "That's the deal." He spent 10 minutes agonizing over his choice before selecting a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, leaving in its place a brightly colored book about dinosaurs. For the next 3 weeks, he was my most frequent visitor. His mother, Maria, stopped by one afternoon, pressing a container of warm tamales into my hands. "Thank you, Clara May," she'd said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's been struggling with his reading. He says your library is magic." It did feel like magic. Teenagers I'd only ever seen glued to their phones would stop and browse, sometimes pulling out a graphic novel with a sheepish grin. Mr. Henderson, the notoriously grumpy widower from the corner house, grumbled that it was a frivolous distraction, but I saw him one evening, under the cover of dusk, slipping a thick John Grisham novel inside. The library was a quiet conversation with my neighbors. It was a testament to everything Arthur believed in, that a book is a bridge, and a library is a sanctuary for everyone. I would sit on the porch swing he built, a cup of tea in my hand, and watch the small, beautiful ecosystem of give and take thrive on my front lawn. It was the best part of my day. It was the first thing that had felt truly joyful since he'd been gone. Brenda's violation notice felt like a personal attack on that joy. My first step was to follow the rules, no matter how ridiculous. I spent an entire afternoon composing an appeal letter to the HOA board. I was a school teacher for 40 years. I know how to write a persuasive letter. I was polite, respectful. I outlined the library's purpose as a community-building initiative and a memorial. I attached photos, Leo with his book, a group of girls sitting on the grass reading together. The thank you note Maria had tucked inside a copy of Goodnight Moon. I poured my heart into it, believing that surely, presented with evidence of such simple goodness, they would see reason. The response was a curt, 2-sentence email from Brenda. "The board has received your appeal. The matter will be discussed at the next monthly meeting." The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of air freshener and quiet desperation. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly pallor on the dozen or so residents in attendance. Brenda sat at the head of a long folding table, flanked by 2 other board members, a man named Gary who looked perpetually confused, and a woman named Carol who nodded at everything Brenda said. They spent 45 minutes on the first agenda item, a heated debate over whether petunias were an acceptable border flower, or if they projected, in Brenda's words, a rather disorderly aesthetic. My stomach twisted into a knot. Finally, Brenda announced, "Next item, the appeal from Clara Mae Thompson regarding the unapproved structure at 114 Willow Lane." She read my heartfelt letter aloud, in a flat, bored monotone, stripping it of all its warmth and sincerity. When she finished, she looked up. "Discussion?" Silence. Gary stared at the ceiling. Carol looked at Brenda, awaiting her cue. "I'll speak, if I may," I said, my voice shaking slightly as I stood up. I repeated my case, my voice pleading now. "It's about more than just a box. It's about our children, about bringing us together. It costs nothing. It harms no one. Please, just come and see the way people enjoy it." Brenda let me finish. She then folded her hands on the table. "Thank you, Clara Mae. The committee appreciates your passion. However, the covenant is clear. We cannot make exceptions. A vote to approve the structure would set a dangerous precedent." She turned to her board. "All in favor of denying the appeal?" Brenda's hand shot up. Carol's followed a second later. Gary, looking deeply pained, slowly raised his. "The appeal is denied," Brenda announced, a thin, triumphant smile touching her lips. "The structure must be removed within 48 hours to avoid further fines." She banged a small wooden gavel on the table. "Next item, holiday decoration regulations." I sat down, stunned. The sheer, unyielding cruelty of it was breathtaking. I felt the eyes of my neighbors on me, a mixture of pity and discomfort. No one spoke up. No one wanted to be Brenda's next target. Walking home in the cool night air, tears of frustration blurring the streetlights, I felt utterly defeated. They had all the power. I had a box of books and a fine that was set to double to $200. Alex Chen, my neighbor's son who was home from college for the summer, was sitting on his porch steps, scrolling on his phone. He saw my face and immediately stood up. "No luck, huh, Mrs. T?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "That woman is a tyrant," he muttered. He was a good kid, bright and funny, with a strong sense of justice that hadn't yet been ground down by the world. What was her exact reason again? "It's a permanent structure," I recited numbly. "That's the official violation." Alex went quiet for a moment, his eyes narrowed in thought. He looked at the library, then back at me. A slow grin spread across his face. "Permanent, huh?" he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "So, what if you make it temporary?" And just like that, a tiny, defiant little spark ignited in the cold pit of my stomach. The spark Alex had lit in me grew into a full-blown bonfire of malicious compliance. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, armed with a highlighter and a pot of strong black tea, I sat at my kitchen table and read the Oak Creek HOA covenant and bylaws from cover to cover. It was a 78-page document of soul-crushing legalese, a masterpiece of bureaucratic misery. But Arthur had always said, "Know thine enemy, Clara Mae," especially when they write the rules. I skimmed through pages about satellite dishes, fence heights, and the mandated shades of taupe for exterior paint. Then, on page 42, I found it. The Golden Ticket, Section 9, Vehicles and Mobile Equipment. No trailer, camper, recreational vehicle, or boat may be parked in a driveway or public-facing area for a period exceeding 72 consecutive hours. The key words slammed into my brain. Trailer, vehicle, mobile. The covenant was obsessed with things being fixed to the ground. Brenda's violation notice, my appeal denial, all of it hinged on two words: permanent structure. My library wasn't permanent if it could move. The rulebook that Brenda wielded like a weapon had a loophole, and I was about to drive a garden wagon right through it. The next morning, I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in months. I found Alex watering his mother's beleaguered petunias. "Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need your help. We're going to the hardware store." He looked up, a grin spreading across his face. "Is this what I think it is?" "It's exactly what you think it is," I confirmed. 2 hours later, we were back in my garage, the proud owners of a heavy-duty garden wagon with thick, rugged tires, several bags of concrete mix, and a handful of industrial-strength bolts. Alex, who was studying engineering, was in his element. He sketched out a plan on a piece of cardboard to properly weight and balance the wagon so it wouldn't tip. The work was therapeutic. We mixed the concrete in a wheelbarrow, the gritty sound a satisfying counterpoint to the HOA's silent, paper-based warfare. We poured it into the wagon's bed, creating a solid, heavy foundation. While it cured, we carefully uninstalled the library from its post in the yard. It felt heavier in my arms than I expected, freighted with the weight of both memory and defiance. With methodical precision, Alex drilled holes through the library's floor and the wagon's metal frame. We secured it with the bolts, tightening them until the little structure was a permanent part of its new mobile chassis. The final touch was the paint. Using a stencil Alex had printed out, I carefully painted in cheerful white letters on both sides, "Oak Creek Community Bookmobile." We stood back and admired our work. It was absurd, it was brilliant, it was beautiful. The next morning, with a sense of theatrical flair, I wheeled the bookmobile to the end of my driveway, placing it in the exact same spot where the post had been. It was Saturday, and I knew Brenda did her power walk around 8 a.m. sharp. I sat on my porch with my coffee and waited. She came around the corner, clad in fluorescent pink lycra, her face a mask of grim determination. She saw the bookmobile. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her mouth fell open. For a solid 10 seconds she just stared, her brain visibly short-circuiting as it tried to reconcile what she was seeing with the bylaws committed to her memory. I gave her a small, sweet wave. She didn't wave back. She just turned, her power walk forgotten, and marched stiffly back to her house. It was the most satisfying sip of coffee I have ever had. The victory, however, was short-lived. Brenda was not a woman to be outsmarted without a fight. The following Monday, another letter appeared in my mailbox. The fine was now $400, citing the continued presence of the unapproved structure. This time, I was ready. I wrote a formal dispute, my tone meticulously polite and maddeningly technical. "Dear HOA Board," I wrote, "pursuant to the notice received, please be advised that the item in question is no longer a permanent structure, as defined by Covenant 7.4. It is now a mobile apparatus, governed by the regulations outlined in Section 9. In accordance with Section 9.3, the bookmobile is moved every 48 hours to a new location on my property, thus never exceeding the 72-hour limit. Please rescind the erroneous fine at your earliest convenience." I included a photo of the bookmobile with its wheels clearly visible. This, I learned, was like throwing a bucket of water on a grease fire. Brenda couldn't get me on the structure violation, so she started inventing new ones. A letter arrived Wednesday. A $50 fine for operating a home-based business without a permit. I disputed it. No commerce is conducted. The books are free. Friday brought another, a $75 fine for improper storage of a recreational vehicle. I disputed it. A garden wagon does not meet the legal or covenant definition of a recreational vehicle. The week after, my personal favorite, a $100 fine for creating an attractive nuisance, citing that the bookmobile might lure children toward the street. This one made Alex laugh out loud. An attractive nuisance? That's what they call swimming pools, not libraries. He'd taken to documenting the whole saga. He had photos of every letter, every fine. He started filming Brenda when she would stand on the public sidewalk, phone in hand, taking pictures of the bookmobile from different angles like a crime scene photographer. He posted his first video to the neighborhood Facebook page with the caption, "Our HOA president, hard at work protecting us from books." The post exploded. Within hours, there were dozens of comments. "This is insane! Go, Clara May! I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. My kids love the bookmobile." "Brenda Reynolds has gone too far this time. Did you see the bylaw about holiday decorations? No inflatables." The tide of public opinion was turning. People I barely knew would give me a thumbs up as they drove by. Someone left a potted geranium on the bookmobile's wagon bed. The little library on wheels was no longer just my fight. It was becoming a symbol of our neighborhood's frustration with Brenda's reign of petty terror. And that, I suspect, is what truly pushed her over the edge. When you corner a person like Brenda Reynolds, they don't surrender. They escalate. Having failed to intimidate me with the HOA's limited power, she decided to call in the big guns. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the front yard, rotating the bookmobile from the edge of the driveway to a spot on the grass near the oak tree. A small ritual I'd adopted to comply with my own cheeky interpretation of the 72-hour rule. A sleek, white police cruiser pulled up and parked at the curb. My heart leaped into my throat. A tall officer with a kind, tired face stepped out. His name tag read Miller. He approached me slowly, his expression one of polite apology. "Ma'am, are you Clara May Thompson?" "Yes, I am," I said, my hands tightening on the wagon's handle. "We received a call about a suspicious vehicle and a possible unlicensed distribution operation at this address." He said the words, "distribution operation," with a subtle roll of his eyes that did not go unnoticed. Just then, Brenda appeared from her yard. Phone held up as if she were documenting a major bust. "Thank you for coming, officer," she called out, her voice sharp and self-important. "This has been a persistent problem." Officer Miller gave her a curt nod before turning his attention back to me and the bookmobile. He peered at it, his gaze taking in the cheerful paint and the books neatly lined up inside. He picked one up, a copy of Charlotte's Web. "My daughter loves this one," he said, a small smile touching his lips. He put it back carefully. "Officer," Brenda interjected, marching closer, "this woman is running an unlicensed operation from her property. She's causing a public nuisance." He turned to face her, his patience visibly thinning. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a box of used books on a wagon. There's no money changing hands. She's not breaking any laws. This is a civil matter for your HOA, not a police matter." "But it's a public safety issue," she insisted. "It attracts people to the property." Officer Miller sighed, a long, weary sound. "Ma'am, a bird bath attracts people. Flower gardens attract people. That's generally considered a good thing in a neighborhood. Unless Mrs. Thompson is forcing people to take these books against their will, there's nothing I can do." He gave her a pointed look. "Please don't call 911 for HOA disputes again. It ties up resources for actual emergencies." He tipped his hat to me. "Have a good day, Mrs. Thompson. I like what you're doing here." He got back in his cruiser and drove away, leaving Brenda standing on the sidewalk, sputtering in indignant fury. Her next move was to go over the police department's head. She went to the city. A week later, a man in a beige polo shirt with a City of Oak Creek logo embroidered on it knocked on my door. He was holding a clipboard and looked profoundly weary, as if his entire job consisted of dealing with people like Brenda. His name was Mr. Davis, from the Code Enforcement Office. "I'm here about a zoning complaint," he said, not meeting my eye. "Filed regarding a mobile vending apparatus operating in a residential zone." "Mobile vending?" I asked, aghast. "I'm not selling anything." "Doesn't matter. he said, his voice flat. "The ordinance pertains to the distribution of goods, commercial or otherwise, from a non-permanent structure. You've got 10 days to cease operations, or the city will start issuing citations. They're a lot more expensive than your HOA fines, I can tell you that." This was a blow. The police had understood. They had common sense. But this was the faceless, grinding machinery of municipal bureaucracy. Mr. Davis wasn't a villain like Brenda. He was arguably worse. He was indifferent. To him, my bookmobile was just a case file, a box to be checked. The threat was no longer about a petty tyrant's rules. It was about city ordinances and legal statutes. This was a battle I didn't know how to fight. The pressure mounted. The joy I'd felt in my small rebellion was curdling into a constant, gnawing anxiety. I wasn't sleeping well. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, my mind racing through bylaws and city codes. One afternoon, while weeding my garden, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world tilted, my chest tightened, and I had to grip the fence to keep from falling. The next day I was at my doctor's office. Dr. Evans, a woman who had been my physician for 20 years, looked grimly at the blood pressure cuff. 160/100, Clara May. This is dangerously high. What on earth is going on? I told her everything. The library, Brenda, the fines, the police, the city. As I spoke, the dam of my composure broke, and I started to cry, silent, hot tears of sheer exhaustion. She listened patiently, her expression softening. When I was done, she put a comforting hand on my arm. "Clara May," she said gently, "this is a box of wood and paper. It's not worth your health. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let go. For your own well-being, I am advising you to stop. Just get rid of it and let this all be over." Her words, meant to be kind, landed like a punch to the gut. I drove home in a daze. Was she right? Was I sacrificing my health for a symbolic gesture? The thought of giving Brenda the satisfaction of victory was sickening, but the thought of having a stroke over a garden wagon was terrifying. I pulled into my driveway and saw it. Another official notice, this one from the city, taped to my front door. It was an order to comply. As I reached for it, I saw Mr. Henderson from the corner house marching across his lawn toward me, his face set like granite. I braced myself for another lecture about just complying. He got to my porch and pointed a trembling finger at the notice, then at Brenda's house, where she was peeking through her blinds. "That woman," he growled, his voice a low rumble of pure fury. "I just saw her on the phone with the city crowing about her victory." He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a fire I'd never seen in him before. "I was wrong, Clara May. I told you to give in, but this has gone from petty nonsense to outright malicious persecution. This is no longer about a library. This is about an abuse of power." He took a deep breath. "I was a litigator for 40 years. I'm retired, but I'm not dead. If you'll have me, I'd like to represent you. Pro bono, of course. We are going to fight this, and we are going to win." In that moment, standing on my porch with a city violation in one hand and a diagnosis of stress-induced hypertension, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. A surge of hope. The fight wasn't over yet. Mr. Henderson's entry into the fray changed everything. He was a force of nature, a grumpy, silver-haired whirlwind of righteous indignation. My kitchen table, once a place for tea and quiet reflection, transformed into a war room. It was covered in city ordinances, HOA bylaws, legal pads filled with his spiky, illegible handwriting, and, thanks to Alex, printouts from the neighborhood social media page. While Mr. Henderson delved into the legal labyrinth, Alex launched a digital offensive. He created a simple online petition titled, "Support the Oak Creek Community Bookmobile." He posted it with a concise, powerful summary of the entire saga, complete with photos of the violation notices and clips of Brenda's sidewalk surveillance. The goal here, Mrs. T, he explained, his fingers flying across his keyboard, is to show the zoning board that this isn't one person breaking a rule. This is one person standing up for the community against a ridiculous abuse of power. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 days, the petition had over 500 signatures. They weren't just from our neighborhood. People from adjacent communities, people from downtown who had heard the story from a friend of a friend, all signed and left comments. An attack on a little free library is an attack on kindness itself. Keep fighting. We're all behind you. My mother lives in Oak Creek. I'm signing on her behalf. This HOA president sounds like a nightmare. Mr. Henderson, meanwhile, had found our legal foothold. It's beautiful, he said, slapping a highlighted copy of a city ordinance on the table. Brenda and the city are calling the bookmobile mobile vending. But the ordinance defines vending as the distribution of goods, wares, or merchandise. A book, when freely given and freely returned, is none of those things. It's an idea. It's knowledge. We're going to argue this isn't a zoning issue at all. It's a First Amendment issue. The day of the hearing with the City Zoning Appeals Board arrived. The room was a small, stuffy auditorium in the basement of the City Hall, with wood-paneled walls and the faint smell of floor wax. I had expected it to be empty, but it was packed. Alex had spread the word, and the community had shown up. Maria Martinez was there with Leo. The group of teenagers who liked the graphic novels were in the back row. Dozens of faces I recognized from the neighborhood filled the seats, a silent army of support. Brenda was already there, sitting at the front table with a thick binder, looking smug and confident. She was dressed in a severe navy blue suit, the picture of authority. I sat at the adjacent table with Mr. Henderson, my hands trembling in my lap. He gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. Deep breaths, Clara May. Let her talk. The more she talks, the better it is for us. The 3 board members, looking bored and tired, called the hearing to order. Brenda was invited to speak first. She stood and delivered a polished 10-minute speech, her voice ringing with false concern. She painted me as a defiant, stubborn woman who believed she was above the rules that held their pristine community together. She used phrases like erosion of aesthetic integrity and precedent of non-compliance. She presented her binder of photos as if they were evidence of a major crime. It was a masterful performance of portraying kindness as a threat to order. Then it was Mr. Henderson's turn. He didn't stand. He simply leaned forward into the microphone. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice calm and steady. "What Mrs. Reynolds has just described is a series of solutions in search of a problem. She has spent months and wasted the time of city officials and police officers in a personal crusade against a box of books." He then systematically dismantled her entire case. He explained that the bookmobile violated no HOA rule, as it wasn't a permanent structure. He explained that it violated no city ordinance, as the free sharing of books does not constitute vending. He concluded, "This is not about zoning. This is about one woman's attempt to weaponize bureaucracy to bully her neighbor. The only nuisance here is the constant harassment Mrs. Thompson has been forced to endure." The chairman of the board then sighed. "We can open the floor to public comment if there is any." Maria Martinez was the first to stand. "My son, Leo, he was having trouble in school," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "He hated reading, and then Mrs. Thompson put out her library. Now I can't get him to stop. He waits for it every day. That little library didn't just give my son books, it gave him confidence." Leo, sitting next to her, beamed. One of the teenagers from the back row stood up. "Yeah, me and my friends, we hang out there sometimes. It's just a nice, quiet place to be. It makes the neighborhood feel more like a community, you know?" Alex stood and presented the petition, reading the total number of signatures and a few of the most powerful comments aloud. The weight of testimony, of real human experience, filled the room, making Brenda's arguments about aesthetic integrity seem petty and absurd. Finally, the chairman looked at me. "Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to add?" I stood up, my knees weak. I hadn't planned to speak. I looked at the board, then at the faces of my neighbors. "When my husband Arthur passed away," I began, my voice quiet, "our house became very silent. He was a librarian. He believed that books were the cure for loneliness. I built that little library because I was lonely, and I thought maybe some of my neighbors were too." I took a breath, looking directly at Brenda. "This little box of books has never hurt anyone. It doesn't lower property values, and it doesn't create chaos. It creates quiet moments of joy. But the attempts to remove it, they have hurt. They've caused stress and fear, and they've tried to turn neighbors against each other." I looked back at the board. "All I ever wanted to do was share some books. I hope you'll let me continue to do that." I sat down. The room was completely silent. The chairman cleared his throat. He conferred with his colleagues in hushed tones for a moment. Then he looked up and spoke into the microphone. "After reviewing the relevant ordinances and hearing the testimony, it is the finding of this board that the apparatus known as the bookmobile does not constitute commercial vending and is not in violation of any city zoning code." He looked pointedly at Brenda. "The complaint is dismissed." The room erupted. A wave of applause and cheers washed over me. My neighbors were smiling, clapping, some even hugging each other. Mr. Henderson patted my back, a huge grin on his face. Across the room I saw Brenda. She was pale, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. She snapped her binder shut, stood up, and stormed out of the room without a single word, utterly and completely defeated. We had won. The victory at City Hall felt like the end of a long, bitter war. The very next day, a small article appeared in the local online paper with the headline, "Community Rallies Behind Bookmobile, Defeats HOA Complaint." It was a simple, factual story, but it was our story, and it was a story with a happy ending. The fallout in the neighborhood was swift and quiet. Alex, emboldened by our win, drafted a petition to recall Brenda Reynolds as HOA president. He didn't even need to circulate it for long. Within a week, facing an undeniable referendum on her leadership, Brenda submitted a one-sentence letter of resignation to the board. We didn't have a party, but there was a collective, palpable sigh of relief that swept through the cul-de-sacs of Oak Creek. Shortly after, the HOA sent me a formal letter, voiding all outstanding fines. But the real victory wasn't Brenda's defeat. It was what came after. The bookmobile was no longer just my little memorial to Arthur. It was a neighborhood institution, a symbol of our collective stand. Donations poured in. People from 2 towns over would drive by to drop off bags of books. The bookmobile was overflowing with stories for every age and interest. I established a new routine. Every afternoon around 4 o'clock, when school let out, I'd wheel the bookmobile from my yard to the corner of the cul-de-sac, a small, grassy patch under a shady maple tree. The kids started calling it bookmobile time. They'd gather around, trading books, sitting on the grass to read their new treasures. Their parents would join them, chatting and catching up while the kids were lost in their stories. Our quiet street corner transformed into a daily, impromptu town square. Mr. Henderson became a regular, though he'd never admit it. He'd amble over, pretending to be checking his mail, and then exchange his finished legal thriller for a new one, always with a gruff comment like, "Well, let's see if this one is any less preposterous than the last." But I'd see him smile as he walked away, book in hand. One warm evening, a few months later, I was sitting on my porch swing, watching the fireflies begin to blink in the dusk. The bookmobile was parked in its spot, its little solar-powered fairy lights, a gift from Alex, casting a warm, gentle glow. A new family had just moved into the house Brenda used to own. I watched as their young daughter, no older than 8, walked hesitantly toward the bookmobile, her parents trailing behind. She peered through the plexiglass door, her face a perfect picture of wonder. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice carrying on the still evening air. "Is this for us?" Her mother knelt beside her. "I think it's for everyone, sweetie." I smiled from my porch, a deep, peaceful contentment settling over me. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with the echoes of children's laughter, with the quiet rustle of turning pages, and with the enduring spirit of my Arthur. He had believed a library was a bridge. He was right. And my little library on wheels had become a bridge for the entire neighborhood, a rolling, resilient testament to the simple, undeniable power of sharing a good story.